Now, you all probably remember the story of 43-year-old Eric Garner. Back in 2014, he was selling loose cigarettes on Staten Island when police tried to arrest him. They put him in a prohibited chokehold until he stopped breathing and died. The city settled a wrongful death lawsuit and fired the officer involved. But why does this keep happening? It seems like every other week I'm telling a story about another black man or woman who's taken down by police over something. Something that, when you compare it to a person's actual life, is so fundamentally trivial. Well, the House of Representatives has tried without success to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, named after another black man who was killed at the hands of police. And although Derek Chauvin is serving more than 22 years in prison for his role in Floyd's death, some may feel that that still isn't enough. But Eric Garner's mom is not giving up the fight to get justice for her son, as well as other people who were targeted by police. Joining me now is Gwen Carr. She is the mother of Eric Garner. She's also an activist and author. I'm also joined in the conversation by Damon K. Jones, who is a law enforcement professional, an activist, an author, and publisher. I want to thank you both for joining me at the Griot. Ms. Carr, I want to start with you. President Biden has been trying to push the George Floyd bill through, but the bill keeps stalling in the Senate. Do you think that there's any chance, do you have any real hope that this bill is going to get passed?
There's always hope, but we know what's holding the bill back. It's that qualified immunity. Now, the police officers, they do not want that bill passed, because if it's passed and they are charged with any wrongdoing, then it will be personal. They would be personally sued. They could lose their house, their pension, all their funds. So they are fighting hard against that. But if you're a good police officer and you're doing the right things, this shouldn't threaten you, because that's all we want. We want justice. We want fair treatment. We want equality. That's what we're asking for.
And those seem like reasonable asks. Those seem like necessary asks in this country. And yet, for some reason, they keep fighting it. And that qualified immunity piece of it is something I want to talk to you more about. I will talk to both of you about after this quick break. Everybody stay right here, because on the other side of this conversation, we are going to continue to talk about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We also want to talk about the ERIC initiative, the ERIC initiative that Ms. Carr created in honor of her beloved son. Stay right here. You're watching The Griot.
You know what, Mark? I want to give a shout out to you for even covering this on your show. On MSNBC, CNN, we're not even going to get into Fox News. If they even cover this at all, it will always be from the lens of management.
You are watching The Griot with Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome back to The Griot. Before the break, we were talking about the latest push to get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed, signed, and made federal law. I want to bring my guests back. Again, we have Gwen Carr. She's the mother of Eric Garner. She's also an activist and author. We also have Damon K. Jones, law enforcement professional, activist, author, and publisher. This is such an important point here, Mr. Jones. You know, it's one thing to introduce a bill. Everybody applauds when you introduce a bill. Oh, we want justice in policing. Mm-hmm. But the difference between getting a bill named, getting an issue raised, and getting the bill passed is a fundamentally different one. And it's one that's necessary right now. Talk to me about why this bill is so necessary, and if you think it will do anything to help change these relationships between law enforcement, lawmakers, and people of color. Because it seems to me that's part of the problem.
Yes. I also want to thank you for allowing me on the show. I think legislation is key in police reform. We start at the federal level, work down to the state level, and then it will trickle down to the local level. If police departments throughout the nation and the police commissioners, if they do not want to hold their officers accountable, then it's up to the elected officials to pass legislations and laws that will set the standards on how communities are policed and holding officers accountable for their policies, procedures, and their training. And just like Ms. Carr said earlier, if the police officers is doing their job, Why worry about qualified immunity? If you're following your policies and your procedures and training, you're doing your job. So you wouldn't have a problem. Only officers that have a problem with that are those that do not follow the policies, police procedures, and training, and ultimately violate the people that they have sworn to protect and serve.
And I think that's what I'm struggling with, because it's like there's bad cops out there, Ms. Carr, and I see why they don't want this stuff to get passed. But if you're in the Congress, your job should be to oversee this whole process so that everybody gets justice, so that nobody breaks the rules. I've seen you be successful before. You helped get some major legislation passed around chokeholds, including some significant ones for New York. But why do you think it's so hard to get lawmakers on board with the George Floyd Act? I know you said qualified immunity is part of it. Is there any other reason why they're fighting this?
You know, the people who are in power, they supposed to look at this unbiasedly and say, hey, you know, there's a problem. We know there's a problem. We see it every day. So we have to do the right thing. We need to pass this bill. There's a lot in the bill. Even part of the anti Eric Garner chokehold bill is in the bill. But right now it's a state law, but it will become a national law if the George Floyd bill is passed. And they just look like they are just trying to hold us down every time. All we want is fairness. We want justice, we want fairness, we want equality. This is all that we're asking for. That's why I fight so hard. And in New York, I have got a few bills. You know, I was, working with others on other bills that were passed, like the 58 bill, and, the Right to Know Act and the STAT Act. We need these things so that there is accountability and transparency, and we don't get a lot of that.
We don't get much of that at all, Damon, and that's why a lot of people, particularly folk of color, don't trust police officers. It's why we don't feel safer or more comfortable when they're in our communities, even in spaces where there's high violence and crime. We don't necessarily feel better to know a police officer is coming. What do we need to do to get more people helping repair relationships? How do we help people reimagine the role that police can play in our communities? What do we do about these problems?
Well, first of all, we got to make...
Let me go to Damon, then I'm going to go to you, Ms. Carr.
Okay.
Well, first of all, these communities, these Black communities specifically, they vote these elected officials in office. They usually, a lot of communities, the commissioner works at the will of the mayor. He's appointed by the mayor. So before we start voting on people to get in office, we should make sure that their agenda when it comes to the police department is accountability and officers being professional within their community, and also having officers that are from their community being part of the police department. I think that is one of the first steps that they could have. And also, community policing is not the police telling the community what they're doing. Community policing is the community having say in how their community is policed. We have to continue to empower the people in these communities around the nation that they have a say. They are the taxpayers, right? The police work and they get paid by the taxpayers. So the community should have a say in how their communities police. White communities all across the nation have a say in how their communities police. Black communities should have the say when they're paying taxes, just like white communities.
That makes complete sense to me. Ms. Carr, before we go, talk to me about this ERIC initiative, this ERIC initiative. You've obviously created in honor of your son. What is it?
Yeah, the ERIC, which is Eric's name, it stands for Eliminating Racism and Inequality Collectively. And what we're doing with this foundation, we are trying to get to the youth that are at risk and show them a better way, that the streets is not the only answer. We want to encourage them, enlighten them, and we want to educate them on things like if the police stop you, how you should react. We want to show them the culture. We just want to save our youth. And we also work with the mothers who have lost their children. We have an
Yeah.
event every year that we bring mothers from all over the nation. We ask for donations to bring, more and more mothers to our event where we embrace, empower, and love on each other. And we can share our stories and share good times that we have had with our children. So this is what we do with the foundation. And right now we are looking for a building. We wish somebody would donate us one. They don't want it.
Well, from your lips to God's ear. Look, that's why we're here. Anybody out there that has the resources, the connection, the hookup, please let us know. The Eric Initiative, ERIC, is something that we want to see grow and expand so that we can eliminate racism, but also so that we can build possibilities for justice everywhere. I want to thank you both for joining me today. It's been an incredible conversation. All right, family, we have reached the end of the show, but before I let you go, I know there's been a lot of talk about legislation to improve the relationships between police and communities. I know there's a lot of bills being floated around and talked about that will hold police more accountable. And look, I'm not going to do anything to block or stop that legislation because I'd rather have it than not have it, except I don't want those bills to fool us into believing that we can find a world in which police and communities function well. Police are occupying forces in our neighborhoods. Police are not the ultimate answer for crime and violence. If we want the world that we dream of, one of democracy, one of justice, one of peace, one of safety, one of dignity, then we have to invest in it. We have to invest in the things that work. Not police, but schools. Not prisons, but education, healthcare, housing, drug treatment. We invest in those things and we don't have to worry about those other things. In other words, we pay now or we pay later. I'd rather pay now by investing in our community than to pay later by locking us up and just assuming that if we build enough legislation, we can get locked up fairly. We can get locked up equally. I don't want that. I want a world where we don't need to lock folk away. And I know that that world is possible.